All right, we're in business. Thanks, everybody. Welcome again. And I'm hoping to kick things off with just a few NASEO updates. I guess prior to that, we'll review the agenda for our meeting today. That'll start with NASEO announcements, and then turn over to State and Territory Energy Office updates, where we'll have folks from our Buildings Committee leadership team, along with a few other states, share some notable program developments, legislative actions, and news from their offices. And then NASEO will also be sharing some updates from DOE and the national labs about various events, resources, and program news that were relayed to us, as well as give an opportunity to partners as well as affiliate partners on the line to share any relevant resources and links to the larger group. And we'll end with any miscellaneous discussion points from the audience, and welcome just a free-flowing conversation to round things out. So the big NASEO update is just that our upcoming inaugural National Building Summit will be in just a few short weeks, September 8th through 9th, at our new office building. NASEO is just moving our headquarters down the street, but we're excited to have our first major event, which will be the Building Summit at that new office space. Registration is filling up very quickly, and I think several of the folks on the line will be in attendance, so we do look forward to seeing you. If you are a state or affiliate partner who is not already registered and are interested in attending, we do encourage you to register now, as we anticipate having to close registration by early next week. All right, actually, I will move back a slide and stop sharing for now and kick things over to some of our states on the line who have a few interesting program updates to share. I do see Chris Corcoran online right now. He will speak on behalf of NYSERDA, who is represented on our Buildings Committee leadership team. NYSERDA is unfortunately unable to attend our summit, I think, in a few short weeks because it coincides with the 50th anniversary. Congratulations, NYSERDA, but maybe this can be the platform to share any updates that you can't share in person.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, sorry we can't attend. It's amazing that it lines up exactly with our 50th anniversary. And Blake, it's good to be celebrating your 50th with you as well from across the country. Uh, I'm here to actually, on behalf of NYSERDA, covering for Suzanne, who is in the midst of a total New York City subway meltdown right now. Well, my apologies in advance. I'll do the best I can to cover things for her. Few things to update the group on. Wanted to share some information about our recently launched Buildings of Excellence program. It's our the most recent round that came out. Have some thoughts on the HR1 federal bill, and then some miscellaneous updates on other programs and changes in New York State. So on the Buildings of Excellence program, I know that we've talked about this on previous calls, but this program is really a one-of-a-kind design program focused on new construction. We fund it with a mix of ratepayer, RGGI dollars, and really the goal is to support the most advanced, cleanest, most comfortable, and most resilient buildings possible in New York State. The great news is we've gone through 5 rounds of this project of this program, and through that have supported 75 buildings through the process. And those buildings across the board have shown you can do near passive house decarbonized buildings at a cost-effective price. They come out as healthier and more energy efficient. It's kind of a win-win showing across the board. The other nice thing about it is it's really, the program itself has been focused on low and moderate income New Yorkers and disadvantaged communities. So we've had 70% of the awards have gone to buildings with low and moderate income households. And more than 57% of the projects are in disadvantaged communities. So we've really, tried to nail down kind of getting those best in class buildings, supporting them, and then demonstrating, to the rest of the state that these can be done cost effectively and result in great outcomes for the folks who are renting and living in them. Um, as I mentioned, just launched our next round. It's round six is in the works right now. So we're accepting applications through September 17th. Anybody knows anyone, any developers that want to apply, feel free, send them our way. Happy to take them. Always looking for more folks with great buildings. Any questions on that before I move on to the HR1? Okay, great. We'll keep going then. Lots to cover. So I think similar to just about every other state on this call, NYSERDA and New York State has been, working to understand the impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill and, or HR1 and what all of these tax credit rescissions mean for folks in our state, specifically around energy efficiency and electrification. Um, this has been a kind of all hands on deck, effort to go through all the past statistics, look and see, who's getting what from the IRS, getting benefits from, Energy Star, and just really digging in to look to see how New York homeowners and builders are going to be affected when losing, the 25C, 25D, 45L tax credits. Um, Obviously, again, this is something that we're all facing, and we're thankful to have partnership of folks, organizations like NASEO to help provide additional information. We're also working closely with NEEP, NESCOM, ACEEE, and others, just to make sure that we're covering all the bases. Um, at a high level, I guess the headline here, and it's kind of an unfortunate headline, but we're showing that New York is going to miss out on around $380 million a year of from the tax credits from HR1. So that's based on what we've seen historically. That's where the numbers have penciled out, and unfortunately those impacts are going to be uneven, and certainly not often to the folks that can handle it least. I think one really good example, and you all know, I come from the code side of things. We just updated the state code this last month. It's pushing towards passive house. We're increasing efficiency, requiring electrification. All of the things that you want in new construction, but with the loss of these tax credits, it's going to make it more expensive to install those heat pumps and have a higher performing heat pump or higher performing Energy Star like homes. So the our guess, best guess I get at this point is that it's going to end up resulting in lower adoption of heat pumps as we move forward, and that's going to hurt everybody, especially as we're looking to make that transition to heat pumps for heating in the north here. Obviously, we're going to keep monitoring it. We're going to keep digging in, seeing what we can do, and certainly invite other partners as you have insights, have ideas. Let us know, and see what we're happy to help wherever we can on that front. Two other brief updates. I mentioned it already. The energy code. New York State adopted the 2024 IECC with amendments and mandates around zero emissions new construction. This is a big deal for us. We're really excited to make that switch. It's going to result in better, more comfortable, more resilient homes and buildings across the state. It's a real win for New Yorkers. Plus, our numbers show that it's going to save an average household about $600 a year, and average business about $70,000 a year in electricity bills. So again, this is a win-win. Better buildings, more comfortable, and saving money down the road, which we all know and can support. Last point from my side, our regulatory process. We're just finishing up our new set of regulatory approvals for the next 5 years. We have received guidance for the 2026 to 2030 period. NYSERDA continues to be a statewide lead on market development. We're going to be focusing a lot of our efforts in the go forward around affordability and climate resilience, as well as kind of, as we said, health and comfort. So I know a lot of folks have been talking about that, shifting that focus towards affordability, and we are all in that same boat. So happy to take any questions on that. But Jasmine, I know there's a lot of other folks to cover, so hope that helped.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. And Suzanne, I know you're contributing in the chat, so if there's anything you would like to add, definitely welcome that. We can kind of table discussions about or follow-up questions and comments to the states that we're hearing from for our larger Q&A session at the end, but appreciate those updates. And Blake, I think I'll call on you next to provide updates from the Oregon side, since I think some of these topics that Chris covered have some overlap with what you were able to share. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. For folks that don't know me, I'm Blake Shalide with the Oregon Department of Energy, and I'll just give a quick update, mostly on our Oregon State Building Performance Standards program, and then a few other updates for us. So some folks might know we adopted legislatively a building performance standards program that applies to mostly large commercial buildings, more than 35,000 square feet. We finished our rulemaking for that based on ASHRAE Standard 100 late last year, and we've been kind of moving forward with program implementation for the most part of this year. That includes developing like guidance documents, answering a lot of questions. One of our big tasks to do was to notify covered commercial building owners of the requirement, because you can imagine there's a lot of building owners out there across the state. Some just individual building owners, some organizations own a lot of buildings that might have been tracking the legislation, but a lot of building owners are probably mostly unaware of these requirements that are coming at the earliest in 2028 for compliance. So there's still a couple of years that need, for the kind of the on-ramp into compliance and meeting energy targets. But one of our big tasks was to communicate with these building owners. It was a pretty big effort to gather all the building data from like county tax assessors, other data sources. We ended up sending out about 30,000 pieces of mail back in June to notify these building owners. A bunch of them got returned to us too, just because addresses that we got were bad. There's a bunch of buildings that don't have a mailbox. We're finding like no receptacle to receive the mail. So that's another effort that our team's doing, is going back through those return mail pieces to try to do our best to notify the building owners, at least through a letter. And then we're asking them to then log into what we call our property inventory list to like confirm the information that they have on their building. That will also give us like a name and an email address and a better way to communicate with these covered building owners. So it's a relatively iterative process, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So for any folks that are implementing building performance standards or thinking about it, just think about that as like a major effort, because there's not like a central place you can go for like, hey, tell me all the buildings in the state over 35,000 square feet and who to contact about them. So that's one big effort for us. We've got a couple incentive programs for early and voluntary compliance with our BPS. So we're still kind of in that early compliance phase. So we got a relatively small bucket of funding from our state general fund of $2 million. We're structuring that to help building owners do like planning activities. So like energy audits, benchmarking, developing energy management plans and things like that. And though they can get some money for doing that. And then we've got a larger bucket of funding, $12 million through the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that we're in the process of designing right now, that program, but it would essentially fund projects themselves. So we hope to use the first bucket to let owners like do some planning, and then use the second bucket for actual project implementation, and they'll be kind of sequenced in that way. That's most of the update on the BPS side. On the code side, we just adopted our 2025 commercial energy code. It's based on ASHRAE 90.1 2022, so it brings in a lot of the energy credits and those requirements. So that's been a pretty big shift for our commercial building sector, kind of getting up to speed on that. That just went into effect on July 1st. And then on the residential side, we'll have a code update next year. Oregon has kind of a homegrown code. We don't look directly to the IECC, but we've had like the energy credit, like additional energy measure piece built into the Oregon's code for a couple decades now. So we're, every code cycle kind of brings in what used to be an alternative energy measure like credit into the base code. And then you got to think about what are the new beyond code credits that a builder needs to pick one or two from. So we're going through that code development process now. It's been a really public process. We've got code collaboratives that have been providing a lot of great input to our building codes division through that process. The only other couple things I'll mention, we do have some statewide heat pump incentive programs, trying to push more heat pumps and incentivize those for Oregonians. Most of them that we've been running are fully subscribed from the state funding, but we also, through a separate federal climate pollution reduction grant fund, are providing incentives for $2 million for heat pump installation across the state. And that one really just rolled out a month or two ago. So, contractors can apply for and receive $2,000 per heat pump, and then the expectation is that they reduce the cost of that to the buyer. So I can provide a link in the chat if folks want to look at that webpage and get up to date on that. I'm not super close to that program, but kind of generally staying up to date on it. And then I know Michael Friels from our office is here too, and he's been working a lot more closely with the state energy strategy that's been about a year or so or more in the making. It's out for public comment now. Been a really big effort. I forget how many dozens upon dozens of meetings have been held across all the stakeholders to support development of that like comprehensive statewide Oregon energy strategy that's been led out of our office. But that process, it's out for public comment now. I'll put a link in the chat for that one too. And Michael, if you wanted to say anything on that, feel free to jump in. But that pretty much rounds out my comments and updates for Oregon.
Yeah, Blake, just to build on that, you're right. It's taken a long time. It's 2 years in the making, putting together an Oregon energy strategy. And we still are at kind of the draft point, but this is due in November to our governor's office and legislature. And within the report, we've done energy modeling. We did some specific looks at kind of household energy wallet analysis, affordability, air quality modeling, public health impacts, and kind of some geospatial model mapping, as well as setting kind of the employment effects of different paths. And that's all really exciting. Ultimately, like the report itself, we've got some recommendations we're making to our legislature around some policy actions, and sort of specific to buildings. It's stuff that you would imagine. You want to develop a roadmap for electrification within buildings within our state, bolstering our codes, which Blake already kind of highlighted some changes we're making to codes, but continuing that long term so we can meet some of our decarbonization goals as a state, and focusing on existing energy efficiency programs, bolstering those more, finding more funding mechanisms, focusing more on low to moderate income households within the state, and providing additional support. And certainly on the industrial side, additional decarbonization for our industries and figuring out how to do that. And so it's electrification, it's energy efficiency, all the things that you would expect. But yeah, if we get to the Q&A section and people have additional questions, happy to answer those. And we can certainly throw some information in the chat for links either to the draft document or some of our energy modeling we did or anything like that. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Blake and Michael. I think that touches on a lot of similar themes we're hearing about first state efforts to implement some pretty hairy building performance policies, and also what states are doing to fill some of these gaps around incentives and funding to enable electrification measures. On that note, Becky, I do see you're on camera and might have some things to share about Maryland's similar efforts to implement a statewide BPS, any lessons learned, as well as, I think, a pretty broad portfolio of emerging programs under the Maryland Energy Administration. So I'll turn things over to you.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm Becky Price. I'm with MEA's Commercial Building Decarbonization section. I haven't been on these calls with regularity, so nice to meet you all. And I will be at the summit in a couple weeks. It's actually my birthday on the 8th. So excited to spend my birthday with you all. But yeah, so we are, pretty flush with cash at MEA. Our fiscal year 26 began July 1st, and we've got 275 million to give out to Marylanders through our various grant, rebate, loan programs. Not all of those are for buildings, but a good chunk of them are. So we've got about 20 grant programs at the agency. We have been kind of thinking about how we can pare that down, and sort of structure things maybe by audience type. So for example, local government's going to just one single program. Just giving examples here, commercial buildings going to one single program. We previously had sort of been doing things or organizing our programs by measure type. And it would mean that an entity, if they wanted to go for solar, would do one program, efficiency, another program, et cetera, and just leads to multiple applications and kind of confusion. So yeah, just kind of riffing off the top of my head. We're kind of in grant program launch season right now. So kind of 3 programs that I sort of work closely with. The program managers are our electrification program. Interestingly, we are sort of limited in Maryland statute for to do electrification programs. So there was sort of a back channel way of doing that. 2 years ago or a year ago, the governor sort of pulled some money out of our bank account and put it in a different account that didn't have the restriction on electrification. So we were able to use that money for 2 years for an electrification program. So we did our first year last year, and we just launched our second year. And then once that runs out, we're going to have to think of more creative ways of kind of finding money for electrification. Well, we're still kind of working on advocating for a change in statute in the General Assembly. So happy to talk about sort of the nuances there in person at the summit. We also launched a pretty major local government program. We've got 64 million to give to our county and municipal governments. It's one of the first times the agency is doing sort of a block grant style. So all the counties are eligible for a slice of that pie. Then they can spend it down over 5 years. We heard a lot of the need for flexibility. Previously, we'd approached funding local governments with sort of piecemeal, project by project, which is very administrative and a little sort of big brother-ish. So another program we've got is our Decarbonizing Public Schools program. It's one of our largest pots of money kind of on a regular basis. So we've got 20 million. That 64 million for local governments was sort of a one-time thing. The General Assembly and the governor's office really wanted us to do that. So they sort of found money and told us to do that. So we've got 20 million for public schools. That one is always sort of funded at that level. Kind of for comparison, a lot of the other programs are more so in the 5 to 10 million range. Other things that are going on, BPS implementation. So as folks know, we were, I believe, the 3rd state in the country to pass the BPS. We are in full-blown implementation mode now. Implementation or compliance lies within my sister agency, the Maryland Department of Environment. But we had in statute, there was a line that kind of created or mandated the creation of sort of a technical assistance hub within MEA. So that is what the bulk of what my work is. And I say this somewhat facetiously, but I do think it's a really good analogy. My day job is being a therapist to these building owners. Again, I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but so many of them just need to talk to someone for 10 minutes on the phone, someone to explain what these requirements mean and assure them that there is some assistance for them, whether that's funding, technical assistance. So a lot of it is, I spend my morning kind of figuring out what exists in Maryland, who are the nonprofits that are doing great free technical assistance, where are the other sources of funding, not just within MEA, but with our utilities, with our other sister agencies, and really just regurgitating that information to folks. Again, I'm being somewhat facetious, but like one of my biggest takeaways is folks do not want to read. And I've kind of just had to adjust my job for that and be willing to just spend time on the phone with people. So I'd really kind of sometimes like the best solutions, in my opinion, are the simplest. Yeah. So we're working on that. The first benchmarking deadline is September 1st. Last time I checked, we've got just around 2,000 buildings that have submitted benchmarking. We suspect there's 15,000 buildings subject to the policy. It is kind of an honor system. We have GIS data that can kind of give us a guesstimate of how many buildings are 35,000 square feet, but it really is up to building owners to figure out their square footage and then take the compliance actions if they need to. And then I guess sort of the final exciting thing that we've been working on is the Warmth Act. So I think we sort of made news with that in 2024 when our General Assembly passed the Warmth Act. It was modeled after a similar policy in Massachusetts. So basically it requires investor-owned utilities to do geothermal kind of pilots. So basically find communities, convince them to participate, and then take existing gas lines and do a geothermal in buildings. So MEA was kind of implicated. We were required in law to create a grant program to fund nonprofits to do community organizing. Kind of the ethos there is that non-state actors are sometimes better received at doing organizing. So we gave out money to 4 nonprofits to kind of do block parties, really gin up support, get buildings excited to potentially participate in the pilot, swap out their stoves, their HVAC for induction, heat pumps, etc. So we just awarded that in the summer, and the utilities, on the other hand, have been kind of figuring out, finalizing which communities they're going to do this in. So not much to share on actual implementation yet, but sort of the prep work is going on behind the scenes. I just rambled a lot. I think that's it for me, but lots going on here. And again, happy to chat in a couple weeks.
That was awesome. Thanks, Becky. I think you ran through every suggestion I put on your plate, and that was just the longest laundry list. So I appreciate you doing that and all those updates. All right. Well, I think I do see Kudrat, you on the line. If you're able to come off mute, you can give me a thumbs up about it. If not, that's okay. But I know that there's been also some work happening at the Colorado Energy Office to similarly support a statewide building performance policy. I think our usual representative, Adam Berry, who represents our central region from the Buildings Committee leadership side, isn't able to attend, but we can also table those remarks for later. I could try. I see your note in the chat. Yeah, feel free to use the chat to provide any updates or come off mute. But in the meantime, I guess with our commercial building and public building heavy focus, I want to also shine a spotlight on all the residential work happening through the buildings team at NASEO, led by Maddie, and give her a chance to share some of the updates happening on the home energy rebates programs that a lot of you all might be very looped in on and others not so much. So over to you, Maddie.
Thanks, Jasmine. I'm happy to be here and happy to bring a residential perspective to the meeting. Just in case we haven't met, I'll introduce myself briefly. Maddie Kohler. I'm a program director here at NASEO, mostly focused on residential buildings, and spend most of my time on the IRA home energy rebate programs. And so today I'm going to give a little bit of an update about state actions in the rebate space since last time this group met in June. But before I get into that, I wanted to make sure I have an opportunity to shout out Indiana. They went live with their programs back in May, and just will always take as many opportunities as I can get to shout them out, just in case we haven't had a chance to discuss it here yet. So they are live with both of their rebate programs, doing some really interesting stuff with affordable multifamily housing. We did have a states only call. I can't remember if it was this week or the previous week where they presented on their program design. So if you are a state and would like the slides from that meeting, please let me know. I'm happy to share. So the reason I think that Indiana is so exciting, they have been our only sort of like public facing state action. They were actually approved to go live with their programs at the end of last year. So this is not a new approval in this new administration. This is an old approval that got acted on in May. So that means everyone else, we're still waiting for reviews and approvals. The best timeline I can give you is that in Secretary Wright in congressional testimony said that he anticipated all the program reviews to be done by the end of the summer. So hopefully coming up soon, we will have one, confirmation that these programs will continue to exist, and two, guidance for the programs, revised guidance. But even though we're waiting on DOE, states are still being active in this space, planning their programs. Let's see here. Texas, since last time we met in June, Texas opened and closed an RFP for implementation. Pennsylvania also opened and closed an RFP for implementation. Maryland has an RFP that is still open. And so Alana hopefully can put that in the chat. Yep, Alana just dropped that one in the chat. Maryland's is still open for anyone that's still interested. And just in case folks are curious, in addition to states sort of like working on their own individual plans for implementation, we also get the states together regularly so that they can conduct peer sharing. So every month, each of the 6 NASEO regions gets together to share updates. We also have cohorts based on when states anticipate going live, because there's definitely unique issues that come up as you get closer and closer to launch. And we also have, sort of standalone topical calls. We are in the midst of several calls on stacking weatherization programs with rebates. We've got another one in the works, and this is fairly unique in the sense that states are welcome to invite their implementers to join the call and join in the fun. And so, Alana, if you wouldn't mind grabbing that registration link too, that would be great, in case folks are interested in checking it out. Everything is on the events page if you want to reference it later. But yes, I think that's it from state updates. We continue to plug along and be optimistic that these programs will turn out and be helpful to everyone. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll give the floor back to Jasmine.
Great, thanks, Maddie. I know that's on top of a lot of folks' minds, so thank you for that update. I do want to give any other states in the room an opportunity to come off mute and share anything that might be related to what you've heard from other states and kind of inspiring something to this group, but I'll give folks a second to think. If there are no updates, I'll then take this time to share a few additional resources before then opening it up to some partners on the line to share more about any relevant resources of their own. If folks can see my screen, the DOE Better Buildings program has a lot of great resources that we wanted to amplify through this group. Specifically, their series of summer webinars that are in full swing. A series of webinars have already happened. I think the most recent earlier this week on small buildings controls that I found very interesting. All of these links are live hyperlinks in the slide, but I'll be able to share these very shortly after this call today, so they're actually clickable. But I believe there are several webinars left and encourage folks on the line to tune in on a variety of interesting topics. I think some rehashed from the Better Buildings Summit, or Better Buildings and Plant Summit, I should say, earlier this year, for anyone who wasn't able to attend that in person. And then there are a bunch of other resources here that I won't, read through one by one, but they live online and they're completely open source and free for folks to access. And I think many are very useful for those working in the commercial and public building space. There's also the Financing Navigator that compiles a lot of interesting resources that I think NASEO will also be digging a little bit deeper into as we help states navigate this new environment of tax incentives or incentives that are now being replaced with more, or folks that might be looking for financing options with the rescission of some tax credit opportunities. And then we also want to highlight the Better Buildings Challenge and Better Climate Challenge for any states who might be interested in opting in. This requires voluntary commitments of reducing EUI and emissions across state portfolios. So in case that's something that might be of interest, we encourage you to reach out to Nina Wirch from DOE on this and are happy to facilitate an introduction. And we also want to highlight a few resources that came up, I think, during some of the states' remarks here today. I think NASEO is very closely tracking the impacts of the tax credit amendments and has recently published a piece on that can be found on our publications page. And then there are several really comprehensive roundups also coming out from other organizations that we're pointing to here. And then we also want to flag for anybody who might not be following closely the Energy Star FY26 program appropriations. The House Appropriations Committee and Senate Appropriations Committees convened before going on recess a few weeks ago to determine the spending levels for the Energy Star program at $32 million and $36 million respectively, which is a really positive sign after many months of maybe less optimistic signals about the Energy Star program's fate. So just want to encourage people to continue following that piece. I know that our partners at USGBC have also been publishing a bunch of pieces to keep people in the loop on that. So encourage you to click on those links. And then I don't want to steal Bill's thunder because we have him here to share a bunch of new resources from the Smart Surfaces Coalition. But if anyone was able to join our March Buildings Committee meeting, we featured Bill then to share about the advocacy efforts from Smart Surfaces Coalition, as well as the kind of more preliminary versions of a lot of resources he'll walk us through today. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and drop the link to our March meeting presentation in the chat here if we're not familiar with that already, but otherwise pass things over to Bill to give us that update.
Hey folks, great to see you all again. In case any of you weren't on that call in March, I'm Bill Updike. I'm the Director of U.S. Policy and Programs for Smart Surfaces Coalition. Coalition, more than 40 organizations focused around providing technical resources to help urban areas mitigate things like urban heat islands, stormwater flooding, and all the ancillary benefits that come with that. So we were on the March call. We talked a little bit about the tools that we've been developing for this Cities for Smart Surfaces program. We're working with 10 metro areas around the country and 9 states to do this kind of analysis and technical support and policy support work. We're now kind of in the 1.0 version of the tools. We were in beta form before, and this is the landing page for the geospatial tool that we have, which is called a decision support tool, and it's developed in conjunction with Trust for Public Lands and World Resources Institute. I'm not going to do a full demo. We don't have the time to do that, but I'll just show you what this tool sort of looks like and what the functionality of it is. So it sort of, looks like a typical GIS type platform. It has various layers in terms of geographies. In terms of overlay data, there's some interesting things in here around historic redlining. We grabbed the CGEST Justice 40 layer before it was taken down. The federal government, there's information on tree equity score from our colleagues at American Forests, as well as, various things like 10-minute walk and whatnot. And then we have really interesting layers around land use land cover. This is a World Resources Institute effort, super high resolution and accurate land use land cover analysis, including different types of roof slopes, which is really helpful from an analysis of the potential for technologies like cool roofs and others. We have, a layer around reflectivity. So this is an albedo-based layer around solar reflectance. You can see some nice cool roofs here in that part of Atlanta.
Bill, we might not be seeing the right screen.
Oh, you're not seeing?
You're walking through. Yeah, I think we're seeing a slide that's static now.
Oh, interesting. Okay, let me try this again. Why did that happen? I'm just talking nonstop about nothing that you can see, which is never fun. Let's try this one more time. Are you seeing like a map now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. Let me go back real quickly. You can see different layers here. Redlining I mentioned, tree equity score, other layers like that. And then I mentioned this land use land cover layer, which is quite accurate in terms of land use land cover. There's the reflectance layer, which I mentioned, shows the solar reflectance of different surfaces, tree canopy layer. And then we have our actual analysis. We conducted micrometeorological modeling for all these 10 metro areas where we're working. That shows, both temperature modeling in terms of air temperature as well as land surface temperature. But, perhaps more interesting, we modeled the cooling potential of different smart surface intervention types in the cities. And so there's the sort of cooling potential analysis in different parts of the city. This is really important from an energy efficiency perspective, important from a peak demand reduction perspective. And I can talk a little bit about some research we're working on that front. So there's those layers in there for, heating layers. There's also layers for flooding risk as well. But the most important and interesting part of this tool is this query function. So you can query on things like, health characteristics. You can query on things like percent of energy burden, areas of persistent poverty, housing burden, all sorts of environmental things like roof albedo in terms of solar reflectance of low slope and high slope roofs, and other surface types in the city, as well as, some of the micrometeorological modeling that we've done around air temperature and other layers. And this allows you to layer a bunch of searches into the tool and then identify parts of, the cities or metro areas where, investments might be best placed, or, the biggest impact might happen, all those types of things. Happy to, show this tool more in detail to anyone who's interested in the future, but I'll jump over to our benefit cost analysis tool just for time's sake. And we'll pick one of the cities. I'll pick Atlanta again. So we've now, in the latest version of the tool, we can link the decision support tool geospatially into the benefit cost analysis tool. So once you select your parameters for your search on that query I mentioned, you can take the census tracts from that tool over here. And if you drop down this drop down menu into census tracts, you can import those GeoIDs from the census tracts from the other tool here and do economic, climate, stormwater, heat analysis related to those specific census tracts. But for the case of this, I'll just show you the whole city itself of Atlanta. In this case, it populates information here up in the left and other information around land use, land cover, tree canopy cover, percent of impervious and impervious area. And then you run scenarios. Let's say the state of Georgia. We actually worked recently with the city of Atlanta to pass probably the strongest cool roof ordinance in the country. So this maybe is a good example. You can target these surfaces separately with steep slope and low slope, but just for the sake of speed, I'll target them together. So we can analyze the impacts of different policy decisions. Say the city is creating a solar program and it's going to increase the penetration of solar and other technologies. I'll just enter these in quickly so you can see the results of the different surface intervention types. You can drag and play around with all of these different calculations. It spits out the data here on the right. So you can adjust the intervention time period, the analysis period, and other metrics as well. And then it spits out sort of the economics of what these different types of interventions will lead to. You can turn these on and off now. This is a new feature. If you're, not interested in, some piece of this, like the global cooling potential, and it'll update the data there on the right. You can also then, once you've analyzed all of these different things, you can say, all right, it's interesting to look at the comprehensive approach, but now I just want to see what the cool roof impacts are. You can click on just cool roofs here. You can click back on it and you see all of them together. So it shows the economics and it shows the potential for temperature reduction in that scenario that I selected. It shows the potential for avoided CO2 and CO2 equivalent here in this section, and the potential for managing gallons of stormwater here in this section for that scenario that I selected. So that's sort of the benefit cost analysis tool. And then what we're trying to do is really drive to data-driven policymaking. So we've got the geospatial analysis, we got the economic and other metric analysis in this tool. And then on the policy side, we have this Smart Surfaces Policy Tracker tool, which now has all 50 states and policies, almost 2,000 policies in all 50 states in it, which can be searched based on these parameters here: policy goal, type of surface intervention, state, region, jurisdiction size, climate zone, etc. And that will spit out, once you do that search, it'll spit out the policies of what you've selected. Here you can actually see that Atlanta Cool Roof Ordinance, which was passed like a month ago, showing up there. If you click on any of those things that have come out in your search, gives you a little summary and links to the actual ordinance there. We're also curating some of this information. If you don't want to look at the 15 cool roof policies and that whatever the parameter is that you looked at, we also are curating some of this and developing things like model ordinances, which is actually what Atlanta based their bill on. They based it on this model ordinance that we had developed. As well as, model ordinances and policy justification memos and other things in this best practices section. So that was a very fast overview of these three tools. If any of the states on this call are interested in diving a little bit deeper, happy to do a full demo at some point, either individually or as a group. And our plan is, we're kind of wrapping up this phase of our work with the current 10 metro areas in the 9 states. We're working to fundraise to do another 20 metro areas in the next phase, hopefully another 15 states or so. Data inside of another 15 states or so in the next phase, starting 2026. So that's kind of the plan. Not sure if we have much time for any questions or comments, but wanted to give you just a quick overview of where we're at to date now.
Great. Thanks so much, Bill. It's really nice to see all these updates in the past few months between our last webinar and today. So you must have been busy.
Yeah.
And I do now want to give everybody a chance to chime in. I know I've been seeing a few things in the chat with resources. So yeah, opening up the floor now to everybody in the room who would have anything to share. Cliff, I know that you dropped a few resources in there. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Jasmine. And really interesting to hear all the great stuff happening at states. IMT, as I think most of you know, is doing a lot of work in the building performance standards space. We're staffing the National Building Performance Standard Coalition. Those states on this call that already have building performance standards are part of that coalition. So thank you for being part of the coalition. Thanks for the great work you're doing. We do have a building performance standard implementation guide. I put a link to it in the chat. It's, I think, the most comprehensive guide of its kind by far. And it's a living document. So if you have anything that you think we should add to that, we'd love to see it. But I hope those that have building performance standards are already referencing it. And if you're not, I hope you will. And thank you, Becky. See your note in the chat. And we have just published a paper on alternative compliance pathways for building performance standards. I put a link to that in the chat as well. This is a hot topic. Legislation in Maryland and Washington State and Colorado has sort of addressed this. And so we have funding from the U.S. Department of Energy to work with building owners and jurisdictions on thinking about a more systemic, more standardized approach to alternative compliance plans. Hopefully, we can get a lot of harmonization across jurisdictions, which will make it easier for service providers and building owners that own buildings in several jurisdictions with building performance standards. So some of you are already participating with us in what we call our BPS Path project. And those of you, especially with building performance standards, if you'd like to get involved, please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as cliff@imt.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Anybody else?
Hi, Jasmine. I have one.
Go ahead, Krista.
Hi, everyone. Krista Michelet. I'm Buildings Policy Advisor with the U.S. Climate Alliance. I know we talked about HR 1 and impacts to tax credits. Wanted to let you all know that the Alliance, along with Climate Mayors, has recently put out a communications campaign to communicate these changes to consumers and businesses. I'll put the communications toolkit in the chat. Everything's white labeled. It's meant for states and cities to use. You can use our graphics for social media. There's no kind of logo on there or anything. So use as you see fit. Other communications that can be put on a state agency website, for instance. So I will drop my email in as well if you have any questions. We're happy to troubleshoot.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing that, Krista. I might use the last 2 minutes to share a slide I forgot I had, and that's just to provide a QR code linking to an LBNL survey that they're hoping to get responses to. This is on residential electrical panel upgrades and the affordability of those measures. And so I think they're looking for folks to respond to the survey who work within, the buildings department staff and of your offices or utility implementers, contractors. And I think this would take 20 minutes. So do encourage anybody who might fit that bill to fill this survey out and otherwise direct any questions towards us, and we can put you in touch with the staff contact over there at LPNL. Anybody else before we close out with the 3 minutes left? All right. Well, I know a lot of great resources were shared here today. I think we'll be sure to follow up with the slides as well as some of these links copied into the chat for anybody who is on the line and also wasn't able to join. Otherwise, if you have any follow-up questions, thoughts, things to share with the group, do feel free to reach out to me at jxie@naseo.org, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day.